So for the better part of the last 20 years, GameMaker's draw text and related functions have been, to put it charitably, not very good. And this has led a number of users, myself included, to seek external solutions for drawing text in our games. Probably the most popular example of that being the Scribble extension by the wonderful Juju Adams. And in the most recent main update to GameMaker, the most recent monthly update to GameMaker, that's going to be January 2023, the text drawing features in GameMaker just did get a little bit better. And while we still don't really have anything like inline text formatting commands like Markdown or whatever, support for scaling and transforming drawn text has gotten a little bit better. So if I draw set font 1, and if I were to draw some text at, let's say, 32 on the screen, the string, I need a string to draw. It's the national anthem of the GameMaker user. We are going to have, well, in this example, it's just going to be drawn text on the screen. It's going to be text at 32 in the room. It's going to be 1-to-1 scale, and I believe I set it to size 20, the font. And that's okay. It looks more or less the way you'd expect it to. However, if you try to scale it up, for example, with the draw text transformed function, we can now pass in a few scaling related arguments. I'm going to probably want to insert a line break in here. And we're going to scale up this drawn text by a factor of 4. And it's going to start not looking very good. So it's going to start, you're going to start noticing pixel aliasing. You're going to start noticing that you can kind of, like, the pixels are like the size of your face on the screen, and it looks very, very pixelated. And that's really not what you want to see happen when you draw text in games. And the reason for this is that GameMaker's font rendering in GameMaker, it doesn't actually do any font rendering in real time. When you build your game, GameMaker will encode all the fonts in your game to texture pages, or when you load a font into the game using font add, it'll basically turn it into just bitmap images, and it'll just draw a series of tiny pictures, one for each character. And when you blow those up, just the same as if you were to blow up some pixel art, and it would start looking pixelated, or more pixelated than it started anyway. When you blow up text like this, it is going to start looking pixelated. And that's really not something we want to see happen. But GameMaker, in the January 2022 update, has started adding support for something called signed distance fields. And signed distance fields have been in the GameMaker news a bit in the last few days, for totally unrelated reasons. There is a guy called This, I cannot and will not try to pronounce that username, but he recently posted a video that got a lot of traction on using signed distance fields to procedurally animate monsters in a... well, I'll let the video speak for itself. But we're going to be using signed distance fields for fonts, and while there's no like checkbox in the font properties window yet that will allow you to just enable SDF on a font, that is allegedly coming in the February 2023 update to GameMaker. And I assume there's just going to be like a checkbox or an on-off toggle of some sort in the font properties that will enable that. Right now, if you want to use signed distance fields in drawn text, we are going to need to use the font add function, and we're going to need to include the font that we want as an included file. So I have gone ahead and added this Carlos Handwriting font to this project's included files. If you want to play with this yourself, it is free on itch.io. I will link to the page where you can find it. I personally like this handwriting font. If you like it yourself, by all means go and tell the creator how much you like it. Anyway, we are going to load in with font add Carlos Handwriting -regular.TrueType font. The size can be 20. I'm going to say no to bold, no to italic, and the range can be 32 to 137, which I actually believe doesn't do anything. 32 to 137 is like the default range for ASCII characters, but I think these arguments are actually just ignored when you say font add, which is a little weird. Anyway, I'm going to save that to an instance variable, and if you were to and I'm going to draw both the original font and the font that we just added and that we're going to mess with on the screen at the same time, just so that you can see a comparison. If you do just this, it's going to look identical. There's going to be no difference. Just saying font add isn't going to do any fancy like signed distance field shenanigans on a font or anything like that. However, If you use a new function, which is font SDF enable, is it font enable SDF? God damn it, GameMaker. And if you set the second argument to true to enable it, then when you run the game and draw your text with a scale of 4, all of a sudden, all that pixel aliasing goes away. So the way that signed distance field fonts work is a little bit involved. Essentially, there's extra information encoded in the bitmaps for each of the font characters for each of the glyphs, which you can read in a special shader, which will tell the shader exactly how to smooth out the edges, basically how far each pixel will be from the boundaries of a character, and that will allow it to smooth out the edges of the text. And as a result, when you scale text up like this, it looks a lot smoother and it looks a lot less pixelated. Now, if you scale up text too far, so if I were to add a font with a size of 8 instead, and if I were to scale it up something like, let's say, 6 times, you would start noticing imperfections, and you would start noticing that while the edges are still smooth, they're not especially useful as far as drawn text goes. And this is because there simply isn't enough information in a small size text, like the encoded bitmaps, to accurately reconstruct a letter like this. So while this does allow you to scale up drawn text like this, it isn't infinite. You can't infinitely scale up drawn text like this. It may be preferable to create a font of size, for example, 24 or 32 or something like that, and scale it up a little bit than it would be to create a font of size 8 or 12 and scale that up a lot, because this is going to give us much better scaling, and it's going to reconstruct the lines of each of the characters much better than simply creating a small font would. A couple notes on this: when you draw a font with SDF enabled on it, it does use its own special shader. So if you were to try to draw text through one of your own shaders, you would find that it wouldn't work, because when you draw text transformed with a signed distance field font, it's just going to draw its own. It's going to use its own shader, which is used to reconstruct the characters like this. And if you know how signed distance field shaders work, you can just add it yourself. It's not that hard. If you know your way around the GameMaker runtime folder, you can actually. If I can find it just by looking through the runtime folder, you can actually just kind of grab it yourself, and you can insert it into your own game. Come on. Where are we? I'm looking for the fragment shader part of the SDF shader. So if I were to open that with a text editor, you can see this is all it is. I do find the check down here if the alpha of the pixel is less than 0 to discard, just because when is that going to ever happen? Anyway, the point is that this is the special shader that SDF fonts are drawn with. There has been a little bit of confusion about why you would ever want to say SDF font enable SDF as like a separate function that you could toggle on or off instead of just making the SDF parameter part of the font add function. Because I would think that in pretty much any game ever, if you wanted to load a font into the game and enable SDF on it, you would just want to do that once at the beginning, and you wouldn't want to toggle it on or off. But ultimately, that's a pretty harmless bit of GameMaker weirdness. And like I said, if everything goes according to plan, in the February 2023 update, so 2023.2, we should see somewhere in the regular font properties just like a use SDF checkbox or something of that nature, so that you don't have to include fonts as an external resource to do this. As a bit of a fun fact, there have been a number of instances where I've made videos on things in GameMaker that have quickly become obsolete as GameMaker updates and adds new things to the engine, and one of those things was going to be using the signed distance fields features in Scribble, Juju Adams text renderer, and then I basically procrastinated doing that for like an entire year. And I procrastinated that for so long that GameMaker just added that into the engine just like as it is. So that's fun. For once in my life, putting things off until the last possible second resulted in me having to do less work. Now, I don't know what's going to happen to the SDF features in Scribble. I don't know if Juju is going to, ditch them because they're now built into GameMaker, or I don't know if Juju is going to, let it continue to live on the side as its own thing. I'll ask him about it, and if he gets back to me before this video goes up, I will put the answer on screen right now. Or if not, maybe if he comments on this video or something, I'll put it in the pinned comment. Anyway, I guess I'll put this project on GitHub in the video description if you want to mess around with it. I will also have a link to the Carlos handwriting font on itch.io, again, if you want to mess around with that yourself. I quite like it. Sometimes you just need a handwriting font that looks like chicken scratch. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. Otherwise, I hope you all found that useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Army Armbuster, DJ Gibbles, Edward Holt, GameMaker, Harold Gidry, Kiexe, Manta Ray, Sindra Larson, Squarecrow, The Oz, VTRV, and Zenjamint for supporting these videos. If you want to support the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.